Hello dear students, here we come to another lesson from the section Trips to Remember, The Bet. This comprises of adventures of Phileas Fogg, who sets off on a journey around the world because he places a bet with his friends that he could do it in 80 days.
Mr. Phileas Fogg, an English gentleman, lives by himself in London. He is a man who lives by the clock. Mr. Fogg has just dismissed his previous personal assistant. He is now interviewing an applicant for the job.
Then from this moment, you are in my service.
Phileas Fogg is playing cards with his friends.
I just read this report about a bank robbery. £55,000 have been stolen, and it says that the thief has fled the country in the guise of an English gentleman. The world is large enough for the man to disappear.
It was once. Now you can go around the world in 80 days. I will bet £20,000 against anyone who wishes that I make the tour of the world in 80 days or less. I shall be due here on Saturday, 21st December at 8:45 p.m.
Unknown to Mr. Fogg, he is being followed by Mr. Fix, a detective from Scotland Yard, London, in search of the bank robber Fogg's friends had been talking about. Mr. Fogg and Passepartout have travelled to a few places and are now on their way to Allahabad.
They are going to kill this woman. We must save her.
All this time, Mr. Fix was also following Mr. Fogg. Poor Mr. Fogg is put into jail and his hopes of winning the bet come crashing down. Soon, it is clear that Mr. Fix has made a mistake.
Mr. Fogg, we must hurry. I have just found out today is Saturday.
Passepartout then seizes his master's hand. They rush out. There are 4 gentlemen standing near the card table in the card room at the Reform Club. There is total silence in the room except for the ticking of the clock and the muffled sound of the crowd from outside. The players silently count off the seconds. At the 57th second, there is a roar of hurrahs from the crowd outside. Almost immediately, the door opens and Mr. Phileas Fogg appears, followed by a crowd of people.
This lesson comprises of 6 different scenes. In scene 1, we come across a man named Phileas Fogg who spends every day exactly the same way, doing things exactly at the fixed time. He never likes to be late for anything. He dismissed his assistant just for a silly mistake that he had brought the shaving water that was 2 degrees colder than it should have been. A man named Passepartout has been appointed as his new personal assistant. Mr. Fogg describes him about his invariable routine and expects him not to make any changes or delays in anything. In scene 2, Mr. Fogg's friends are discussing a news report according to which a thief had stolen £55,000 from a bank and had fled away in the guise of an English gentleman. A debate among the friends begins when Mr. Fogg says that in present day it's possible to go around the world in 80 days. His friends oppose him on this, and then Mr. Fogg places a bet on £20,000 with them that he would make the tour of the world in 80 days or less. They all accept. Mr. Fogg sets off for the trip on 2nd October and wishes to return on 21st December, exactly after 80 days. In scene 3, Mr. Fogg and Passepartout have packed their bags and left for the journey. But a detective called Mr. Fix from London is following Mr. Fogg without his knowledge. Mr. Fix mistakes Mr. Fogg as a robber who had robbed a bank and had been roaming around in the guise of an Englishman. In scene 4, Mr. Fogg along with Passepartout have travelled to a few places and they have now reached Allahabad in India. There they rescue a woman named Auda from some men who were going to kill her. Auda accompanies them on the rest of the journey. After experiencing many adventures throughout their journey, they have now reached Liverpool, England on 21st December. They are only 6 hours away from London when unfortunately Mr. Fogg is arrested and put into jail by Mr. Fix. Soon it is clear that Mr. Fogg is not the proclaimed thief and he is released. In scene 5, Mr. Fogg has lost the hope of winning the bet since he was arrested in Liverpool. He believes that he is too late to reach the club in time. But then Passepartout arrives and tells him that it was a Saturday and not Sunday, so they still have time to win the bet. They both rush towards the club. In scene 6, 4 gentlemen who had made the bet with Mr. Fogg are waiting at the Reform Club. All of them are assuming that Mr. Fogg has lost the bet because there was no news of him arriving from Liverpool. Last 60 are left when all of a sudden there is a roar of hurrahs from the crowd outside. Mr. Fogg arrives at the 57th second and finally wins the bet. But how could Mr. Fogg have mistaken the day as Saturday? This is because during his journey, he had been traveling eastward. In journeying eastward, he had gone towards the sun and therefore gained 24 hours, that is 1 full day extra. And this is how Mr. Fogg went around the world in just 80 days and won the bet of £20,000. I hope you all have enjoyed this interesting lesson. Thank you.